On today's show, we'll take a look at the Houston Rockets' remaining strength of schedule over these final 22 games and whether or not the team should compete and gun for that final play-in spot or soft tank the rest of the regular season to increase their odds at keeping their own pick in this year's draft. We'll look at the pros and cons of each path moving forward and so much more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short row. Oh, my, that's the no-look.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari, Eason.
Here comes Tari. No!
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
To tank or not to tank? That is the question. What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin. The show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day. Thank you for being an everydayer, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making the show part of your day every single day. Now, the question on today's show: compete or tank? I want your thoughts in the YouTube comments. The Rockets have 22 games left this NBA season, and we're going to discuss the pros and cons of both options moving forward. Now, where we got to start here is we're going to actually take a look at the Houston Rockets' remaining strength of schedule, and this is a point in favor of any and all of you, those of you who would like to see this team really compete and try to score that final play-in spot so we can have some postseason basketball for the first time since the James Harden era. The Rockets have the fourth easiest schedule remaining this NBA season. The only teams with easier schedules for the remaining however many games, 22 games. Rockets have 22 games left. It's different for every team. But the only teams with an easier schedule remaining than the Rockets are, unsurprisingly, the Boston Celtics have the easiest schedule remaining, and part of that's because they don't have to play themselves, and they're one of the best team in the NBA. Then the Miami Heat, Orlando Magic, and then the Rockets clock in with the fourth easiest schedule remaining this season. They play the Wizards a couple times. They play the Spurs a couple times. They play the Portland Trail Blazers three times. They play the Jazz 3 times. They play the Bulls once in there. They've got a few teams that are still tough to beat. They've got the Timberwolves and OKC a couple more times, one each. I apologize. They play the Clippers twice. And the Clippers still kind of jockeying for position near the top. Now, one thing to consider when we look at strength of schedule, for those unfamiliar, right, it takes a look at the remaining scheduled games, and it looks at the combined winning percentage for those teams and calculates how difficult, air quotes, your schedule is. One thing that strength of schedule doesn't take into account, right, is it doesn't take into account that there are going to be teams later on in the season that might be resting certain guys, or teams themselves might decide to bottom out and start resting, some starting caliber players, whatever, to increase their own lottery odds, or potentially playoff teams that have, kind of settled into a seed where they're not going to go up or down regardless of how many games they win or lose. And then those teams might decide to rest some of their key players. So strength of schedule is not a perfect metric for understanding how the rest of the season might play out or the difficulty of the rest of the season, but it's a pretty good indicator of where the Rockets stand. So the benefit is here, the Rockets have a really easy schedule coming up, and that's beneficial towards the Rockets' chances of being able to squeeze into that final slot in the Western Conference play-in tournament standings. Now, I will say that they are currently 6 games back. They are currently 6 games back of the Golden State Warriors, who are at 32-28. The LA Lakers are at 34-29. So they're only 5 games back in the loss column of the LA Lakers. And so that's important to note. That's important to keep in mind. because we can also take a look at the remaining strength of schedule for those two teams. Now, unfortunately, the Warriors also have a pretty easy schedule, a bit of a cakewalk for the remaining portion of their season. They have the 6th easiest strength of schedule remaining. They play the Spurs multiple times. They play the Hornets in there. They play the Blazers. The Rockets count as one of the teams that the Warriors have to face. They play the Utah Jazz a couple times. So the Warriors, not a difficult schedule to round things out. And if I had to, if I were a betting man, I would say that the Warriors, I bet, probably finish with a better record than the Lakers. The Lakers have been a lot more inconsistent this year. And to top it all off, the Lakers actually have the 8th most difficult schedule to close out this season. They have to deal with the Timberwolves a couple more times. They have to deal with the Bucks still twice, haven't played them at all yet. They have to deal with the Cavs, Pelicans, 76ers. They've got to do the Kings a couple more times. The Lakers have a bit of a schedule, like a bit of a tough schedule to close things out. And that's beneficial for the Rockets because if the Lakers start dropping some games here and there, it gives the Rockets some life. It gives them a chance to kind of squeeze into that final play-in spot. And also beneficial to the Rockets, the Utah Jazz, the only other team that's currently ahead of the Rockets and potentially in play for that final play-in spot, they have the 2nd toughest schedule to close out the year. They have to play the Celtics. They have to play the Timberwolves twice. They have to play the Nuggets twice. They have to play OKC. They still have to play the Clippers twice. It is a gauntlet for the Utah Jazz to close out this year. I would imagine they are going to drop a lot of those games. But again, keep in mind that certain teams that are at the top of the pecking order and therefore increasing that strength of schedule might not actually be trying their hardest, right? Might not be incentivized to win out some of these games here at the end of the season. So, as we're kind of looking at things and trying to figure out for this Houston Rockets team, what should they ultimately do? Because there are benefits on both sides of the aisle, right? There's benefits to competing and trying to secure yourself that play-in spot. That was the goal for Ime Udoka and company coming into the season. He was not shy about his desire to make sure that he doesn't ever miss the playoffs, hasn't missed the playoffs yet in his career, doesn't want that to start this season. He has made that perfectly and abundantly clear all season long. And then there's the other side of the argument where, if the Rockets did soft tank and try to bottom out, then they could potentially increase the odds of keeping their own pick, the pick that is currently owed this season to the OKC Thunder. It has top 4 protections on it. So very similarly to the 2021 NBA draft where the Rockets actually did owe that pick to OKC, and we were sweating bullets with basically a 50-50 coin flip. What was it? 52.1%, 47.9%, whatever the odds were of keeping versus losing that pick. That was it was a very nerve-wracking time to be a Rockets fan. And thank goodness that pick actually stayed with the Houston Rockets. It turned into Jalen Green, and the rest is kind of history. So we have another situation that's very similar to that the Rockets could find themselves in here. So let's go ahead. Coming up, we're going to unpack the pros and cons of competing, the pros and cons of tanking, and that's going to be coming up here in just one moment. But I also want your thoughts. I want to know how you feel about the competing versus tanking discussion. So give me your thoughts, whether you're listening, whether you're watching on YouTube. Give me your thoughts in the YouTube comments, because I do think there are very legitimate arguments on both sides of the aisle. And I'll share my ultimate opinion at the end of the show after presenting both sides of things. We're going to get to that in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, sometimes we all need an opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that stuff out, especially to someone who's unbiased when it comes to your life. Because, look, it could be maybe you get into a disagreement with a coworker, or maybe you got in trouble at work or something, and that's kind of bothering you, and you're frustrated with yourself or with just the situation, or maybe it's something in your personal life, right? Maybe you get into a disagreement with a partner or a family member, or just there's all sorts of things that go on in our everyday lives. And if you bottle those things up, it can be, really unhealthy for you emotionally, mentally, all that. And therapy can help you really unpack those things. I've done therapy in the past, and I found it to be a really cathartic experience that has helped me a lot in my own life. And therapy can be different for everyone. A lot of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams and whether or not they should be competing for the final play-in spot or tanking to increase the odds of keeping their own draft pick. But it is important to talk about these big things and get them off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off of your very first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, we're going to start with the competing angle here first, because I do think that, again, very strong arguments on both sides. The first argument of competing is, holy crap, how incredible would it be to have postseason basketball again for the Houston Rockets, even if it means you're the 10th seed, even if it means you have to win not one, but two separate games, two single elimination games to be able to get into the playoffs. First off, I think single elimination basketball is incredible. I love the play-in tournament. I love the stakes. I love the environment, all of it, right? It's incredibly exciting. If you're the 10th seed and you're the Rockets, you'd have to go on the road and win not one, but two back-to-back road games to carve yourself out a spot in the playoffs to secure potentially the 8th seed and a first-round series with either the Minnesota Timberwolves or the OKC Thunder or potentially the Denver Nuggets. And let's face it, it would probably be a slaughter, and it's probably a long shot that the Rockets, who have been abysmal this year on the road, who currently 6-24 on the road, only one win better than the Detroit Pistons, who are 5-26 on the road. Complete and utter long shot. But at the same time, I think that achieving a play-in tournament berth would validate so much about what this team tried to do this year, about what this team is still in the process of doing. And I think it would go a long way to showcase a variety of different things. First off, it would be an incredible experience and a very validating experience for a lot of the young guys on this roster. Now, again, it's not a guaranteed 7-game series, but it's a shot at a 7-game series, right? And it's a shot at playing some meaningful basketball and giving yourself a chance to make the playoffs. And that's something to play for is really important, right? These guys, these athletes, they're competitors, right? If you've played any sport in your life, you understand that there's a competitive angle, a competitive drive there, and these guys want to achieve success, right? They don't like losing. The last 2 or 3 years has been really brutal. And it's been tough for a lot of the young guys on this roster, right? Guys like Jalen and Alperen, who were drafted into a really garbage losing situation, and to just know that you were going to lose 50, 60 plus games every season, that's mentally and emotionally exhausting. So to have the reward of finally having a year where the Rockets have turned things around quite considerably this season, to go from last year to what they were last season to what they've achieved already this year, I think you have to just say that this year has been a success in the grand scheme of things, even though we were maybe spoiled a little bit early on by some of the early success, and we had these, at the time, looking back, right, hindsight's 2020, but these illusions of grandeur about, oh my God, the Rockets are going to be, in the playoff hunt, and they're worrying about a play-in spot. We're locking up a full-blown playoff seed now. I do think it would mean a lot to this team, and it would be incredibly validating for the young core, for Ime Udoka, that everything that he has preached, the foundation that he has tried to kind of establish this year, has merit, right? And again, playoff experience for the young guys, even if it's just a play-in tournament, even if it's just one game, maybe it's 2 games, right? Maybe they win the first one, they get to play the second one. Maybe they win both, right? And they get a first-round series, and you get at least 4 games against a top-tier caliber opponent, whoever the number 1 seed is in the Western Conference. That would be absolutely incredible. That would be such a great experience for the young guys. We've seen just how valuable playoff experience can be for young up-and-coming teams, right? You can go back and look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the playoff experience that he had both with the LA Clippers, then with the Chris Paul-led OKC Thunder, and the bubble experience that he had playing against the Rockets. Like, all of that helped mold and help build Shai into the player that he is today. Now, would Shai still be an incredible talent without those experiences? Absolutely. The kid's insanely talented. But learning those lessons, going through those experiences early on absolutely help young players probably grow up and mature a little bit faster, right? So I do think that's one benefit there. I do think it kind of validates what the front office has done or decided not to do in situations, right? It validates the signings of Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks, Jeff Green, right? The names that were brought in to kind of achieve the success that they wanted this year. It also probably validates the fact that they didn't make any moves at the deadline, and maybe not so much that one. Maybe it's just, maybe it doesn't validate that one. They could have still been in a better spot right now had they actually made some moves at the deadline and gotten a little bit more additional support. But that's neither here nor there. And just from a fan perspective, right? Again, I mentioned it right off the bat, but it would be so much fun to watch this young group of guys who we root for, we cheer for, we want to see them succeed, we want to see the team do well. It would be so exciting to be able to, see them succeed, secure that final play-in spot, and have a chance to, root for some postseason basketball, right? And again, the play-in tournament vibes, the atmosphere is incredible, right? Watching the single elimination, the level of tension and excitement in the building, I think that's some of the best basketball that you can witness, because it's so nerve-wracking. It feels like a game 7. It feels like everything's on the line, because it's literally win or go home in the play-in tournament. It's a lot more nerve-wracking when you're one of the bottom seeded teams in the play-in tournament versus if you clock in at number 7, then, and you lose, or 7 or 8, you lose the first game, you still have a chance to secure yourself against the winner of the 9-10 bracket. So it's not quite as nerve-wracking if you're the 7 or 8 seed. But it is a lot more nerve-wracking when you're the 9 or 10 seed and your season could literally end after one game. So I think that there are a lot of arguments for, and another one here is the veterans probably, or a lot of players probably don't want to bottom out. Like, again, and this kind of goes back into the competitor angle here. Convincing professional athletes, right, that it's in their best interest to lose games is a hard message to deliver. We saw that recently with the Dallas Mavericks, right, when they decided to shut everybody down last season. And Luka hated that. Luka was vehemently against that decision that the front office made to try and, lose out the final few games or whatever. And that was only a few games. We're not talking, a long, a marathon of losing. We're talking a handful of games. And they made that choice distinctly with the goal of keeping their pick, because had they done any better, then they might not have kept their pick, and that pick turned into Derek Lively, which coincidentally helped them out a lot more this year. So these are why the front offices have to make these hard decisions, right? About whether or not you cheese the system a little bit, grease the odds in your favor a little bit more. Because at the end of the day, the players are going to want to do what they think is in their own best interest. And what's in their best interest is competing at the highest level and trying to win as many games as possible. It doesn't help any of the players right now in this moment to lose games. In fact, it probably makes them look worse. They would feel worse about all of that. So that's another side of why competing makes the most sense, right? That's the natural order of a sports organization, is to try and win games. These organizations, these billion-dollar organizations, don't exist for the sole purpose of trying to lose games. Now, some organizations are better at that than others. But yeah, so, and then one final note here before we transition into the pro tanking argument is it's going to be really hard to catch some of these teams. When you look at the NBA standings right now and kind of where some of the other teams are at that are going to be, higher up in the pecking order of the lottery this year, the Wizards already have 52 losses, the Pistons 51, the Spurs 48, Charlotte 46, Portland 43. And those teams are going to continue to lose games. Like those are not like set in stone, right? Those losses are going to continue to trend upward. The Wizards are on an incredibly impressive 15-game losing streak right now. And at least momentarily, they have eclipsed the Detroit Pistons, despite having the longest losing streak in NBA history. So that says a lot about the state of the Washington Wizards franchise. You're not going to catch a lot of these teams, but there are some teams that you could catch in the Tankathon standings. We're going to talk about the pros and cons to the tanking situation and whether or not the Rockets should bottom out. coming up here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins, and all you have to do is wager $5. It really is that simple. Bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. Right now, you can take a look at the outright finals favorites this year in the NBA. The Boston Celtics, to no surprise, plus 210 to win it all this season. The Denver Nuggets, plus 420 to repeat this year. James Harden and the LA Clippers, plus 500. The Milwaukee Bucks at plus 700. And then in distant fifth place, the Phoenix Suns at plus 1,800. So for all those odds and so much more action, just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, here is the pro-tanking segment, pro-tanking argument. Keeping that pick sounds pretty nice. Like, it was incredibly nice. The process sucked back in 2021, sweating bullets over whether or not the Rockets would keep their pick, that coin flip with OKC. What was it? 47.9% versus, or no, I can't remember. 52% versus 48% was like the ballpark range, right? It was terrifying going into that 2021 NBA draft lottery. But the Rockets kept their pick, and it turned into Jalen Green. Now, as it stands right now, the Rockets' pick is currently just below the Atlanta Hawks. So the Rockets and Hawks are both 26 and 34. The Rockets are technically slotted right behind them. So they have currently a 16.9% chance at their pick turning into a top 4 pick. The Brooklyn Nets pick is actually just ahead of the Rockets pick, and they have a 26.3% chance of that pick turning into a top 4 pick. Now, here's the rub. The Rockets, no matter how much losing they do, no matter how badly they finish this season, even if they tried their heart, if the Rockets went 0-22 right now, they're still not catching the teams like the Wizards, the Pistons, the Spurs, the Hornets, probably not the Blazers. Like, those teams are going to continue to rack up the losses as this season winds down. So realistically, you're only going to be able to do so much to push yourself push yourself down the standing, whatever, up the tankathon standings, down the real standings, to be able to increase the odds of that pick. But here's the argument, right, for keeping that pick. It gives you a lot of flexibility. It gives you another very strong asset in the rebuilding process, because with where the Rockets are at right now, they still don't have a star. Alperen Sengun came really close this year, and he's playing, at least for the first half of the season, and often he plays like a star level player. And how much better can he get, right? We still don't know what Al P's ceiling is, but so far he's been the best player of the young core 6. When you see the games like Jalen Green had against the Phoenix Suns, then you start to you've seen the insane highs from Jalen Green, right? The ceiling that he has. Min Thompson and Cam Whitmore are both shown incredible flashes. Jabari Smith Jr. as well. But right now, of the Rockets' young core 6, they do not have a definitive star-level player, a guy that can be the face of the franchise going forward, a guy that you think has the chance to be a top 25, top 20, top 15, top 10, whatever guy down the line. I think of all the young guys, Min Thompson probably has the greatest chance to be that guy with his blend of skill, athleticism, IQ, all that. But he's also got a pretty gaping big hole in his game, the fact that he can't shoot the basketball. If that never gets fixed, he's still going to be an incredibly talented player. He's still going to be very, very good in the NBA, but he's never going to be able to be your number one guy, your go-to guy, if he doesn't have a shot outside of 5 feet away from the rim. So the Rockets need that guy. They could draft that guy still, and if you retain access to your pick, if the pick jumps into the top 4, then you have another shot, another bite at the apple to draft a guy that you think can turn into that guy. It also mainly, I think the important thing is here, it gives you another asset to use to potentially trade for that guy. Because let's say the Rockets do hold on to their pick. Let's say they bottom out, soft tank, organically tank, if you want the distant cousin of organic learning. If they do that this season and their pick stays, with them, jumps into the top 4. If you have a top 4 pick and whatever happens with the Brooklyn Nets pick to trade on draft night, to do something with on draft night, then that's a lot to work with. That's a really enticing trade offer to be able to have a top 4 pick number 8, let's say from Brooklyn, and then any combination of the young guys on the roster plus all the expiring salary that the Rockets have to make a play for a big name. Because one thing that happens a lot in these, when a star player gets dealt, is oftentimes we've seen star players being dealt for future assets, right? We've seen them being traded for, years and years of draft picks, 5, 6, 7 years of draft picks to different organizations. I think the enticing thing that the Rockets might be able to offer if they did have both picks in this year's draft, even though it's widely regarded as a bit of a weaker draft, it's more of an instant gratification, right? For a team that wants to immediately hit the ground running with a couple young guys. Maybe you trade a couple of the young core 6 as well. And then that's like breathing new life into another organization if you're able to trade for an established star player that wants off a certain team. And maybe that player puts Houston on his wish list. So having that extra asset could be really beneficial in the grand scheme of things, especially when either you just don't have you don't have a franchise guy yet on the roster, a guy that you think can be that guy. Another point here is just if that pick did jump into the top 4, if it landed number 1, or if the Rockets were somehow able to walk away with Alex Sarr in this draft, my God, he's like the absolute perfect complement to Alperen Sengun. And the Rockets could go from being one of the smallest teams in the NBA to being like supersized jumbo team next season by playing Jabari Smith Jr. at the 3 and Alex Sarr at the 4, and kind of offsetting Sengun's size at the 5. Then you still be able to bring Dillon and Tari off the bench. Like that's an incredible like kind of forward wing combination of players to work with if you lucked into that by the pick jumping up. But again, how realistically, right? How much worse could the Rockets get to increase their pick odds? If they finished 6th worst, right now the Grizzlies are 6th worst at 21-41. And again, the Grizzlies are going to continue to lose games too. But if they finished 6th worst, that's hard to say. That's a 37.2% chance at the pick jumping into the top 4. That's a 20% increase from where you're at right now. That's not nothing, but is it worth it for all the headache of intentionally losing games? Because like I mentioned earlier, it goes against every fiber of these players, the coaching staff, it goes against every fiber of their beings, right? Because you don't become an NBA player by losing, right? It's the natural order of things is to win games. When you are a competitive sports organization, you want to win games. So tanking is hard. It's a hard sell. Sometimes it has merit. Sometimes it's beneficial. We saw it with the Dallas Mavericks, right? They got Derek Lively out of it because they bottomed out a few games. They held on to their pick, and now they have an incredibly impactful, beneficial piece to, for years to come on their team. So I see both sides of the argument, but I do think logistically, I think you would do more harm than good by intentionally trying to lose games just for arguably a 20% increase chance, because it's not even a guarantee is the problem, because you're not guaranteeing that you get a top 4 pick by doing this. All you're doing is increasing the odds of the top 4 pick. And in the past, when we've had these tanking discussions and whether they should be winning games, losing games, whatever, I was very much in favor of losing as much as possible, because the Rockets they didn't have anything to play for. They weren't a serious organization. They were still in the phase 1 of rebuilding. That time is long gone, right? This team is, first of all, I think they've done an incredible job rehabilitating their image so far already this season. They are a competitive team. They fight hard every single night. They're a tough out every single game. They're not getting blown out by teams. They are a monumentally better team than they were last year. And that speaks volumes about what the coaching staff has accomplished with these guys, about the internal growth of some of these guys. And I think you would probably do some damage to the perception of the team, of the organization around the league, if you were to suddenly try and erase all that progress by benching your key veterans, by intentionally trying to give up on games, whatever. And I should have mentioned this in the pros argument for competing, but you're also you're marketing yourself, right, to other players. You're marketing yourself to potential free agents, to potential trade targets, to potential stars that might want to come to Houston. Maybe it's not right away. Maybe it's not, this offseason. Maybe it's, a little bit further down the line, but players take note of these things, right? They see things, they see how organizations handle certain things. And from a player's perspective, what player would want to go to an organization that is willingly giving up on like a quarter of the season, when the play-in tournament is still within reach? And again, I think there's an argument to be made that if the Rockets did make that push, if they make it to the play-in, even if they don't make it to the play-in, right? But if they're like this close, if they're so close to the play-in, who's to say there's not a star player out there who would be upset with his current situation, his current predicament, and he takes a look around the league and he's like, you know what? Houston's got something. They've got something cooking over there. Those young guys are exciting. Jalen, Sengun, Amin, Cam, Jabari, Tari. They've got something, and I could be that missing piece, right? If I demand a trade or if I go sign there or whatever, I could be that missing piece that puts them over the top. And then they go from, barely missing the play-in or making the play-in, but, getting outed in the first game, second game, whatever. Or hell, maybe they make it through the play-in bracket and they become the ace seed, right? And, they get a first round series against somebody and they take a game, right? Underdog kind of thing. Cinderella story. That's a lot easier to market to another player, to a star player, to convince somebody, hey, why don't you come to Houston, right? Come sign with us or demand a trade and come here, right? We've talked about it in the past. There's a lot of players that would love to play for a coach like Ime Udoka. He has a lot of cachet around the league. I think you damage some of that cachet and some of that desire for other guys to maybe want to come to Houston if you bottom out. So I think where I ultimately land is I want to see this team play the best basketball it can play over these final 22 games. I want to see them win as many games as possible. Even if the play-in tournament looks like it's a little bit out of reach, again, we talked about they've got the fourth easiest schedule remaining in the NBA. They've got a legit shot to make it. And by God, I would love to watch some postseason Rockets basketball. It's been far too long. And again, it would validate a lot of things that this team, this organization have done in the past. So yeah, I think that's where I think I land on the compete versus tank argument. Is I'd rather see this team compete, try to win as many games as possible. And you never know what happens, right? Maybe by the end of the season, we're talking about the Rockets as a 10th seed, or maybe even hell, the 9th seed, quite possibly, because again, who knows what happens with the Warriors and Lakers and the Jazz as we round down this season. But I want your thoughts. I want to know how you feel about the argument compete versus tank, whether you're listening, if you're watching on YouTube, drop your thoughts in the comments. It wouldn't be right if I didn't at least do a tankathon spin to end this episode, because hey, maybe the Rockets don't have to tank at all and that pick still jumps into top 4 territory. How are we feeling? Are we feeling lucky today, guys? Let me get my hands together and all right, here we go. Tankathon spin. It's still not fixed on the visuals on YouTube. I'm so sorry. All right, here we go. Oh, okay. No, disappointing. All right. The Rockets pick, it actually bumped down a little bit. Well, no, same spot. 10th overall pick. Nice voice crack there at the end. 10th overall pick goes to OKC. Brooklyn Nets pick, 8th overall, comes to Houston. So it is what it is. We're not going to do multiple spins, or maybe we'll take one more crack at it. Reset. Sim one more time. Nope, nothing. All right. I tried to cheat it and do a second one. But on that note, if you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.